of changes, feather on the bone, arc of eternity, ring around the stone. We are the old people, we are the new people, we are the same people, wiser than before. Cauldron of changes, feather on the bone, arc of eternity, ring around the stone.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Westside Congregation. Today, our service is brought to you in the illusion of a sacred underground chamber. This particular underground chamber is actually found near Avebury in England. It's a place with a huge stone circle, and not just a stone circle, but a procession of stones as high as a person, leading across the countryside. A very special ritual place. So why are we in an underground chamber? Because today we're celebrating Samhain, the most important and sacred holiday for those who follow the path of earth-centered spirituality. Samhain is an ancient Celtic holiday, marking this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere when the fields have been harvested, the crops have been secured for the winter, the days are shorter and the nights are longer. It's a time of darkness, a time of going within, a time of introspection. It's also a time when it's thought that the veil between the worlds is thin and that we can actually communicate with those who have gone before us. In that sense, it's very similar to the Day of the Dead, when families go to graveyards to visit their loved ones who have died. They set up altars in their houses with photos and flowers. And it's not really a sad time. The visits to the graveyards can become picnics with their loved ones and a time for telling stories. It's a time for remembering. So, welcome. We're glad that you could join us as we celebrate Samhain and the Cauldron of Change.
Each week, we share announcements that are important to the life of our congregation. We have received a reply from New Mexico Black, thanking our congregation for reaching out to them and offering our property for their use. They don't have an immediate need, but are grateful for our support. Today's the day to bring your Storehouse West donations to the church between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. In addition, there's going to be a special donation day on November 14th for holiday meal supplies. We'll be bringing our donations directly that day to the Storehouse West food truck parked at the Presbyterian Church. Check your email for details. Reverend Nancy wants to know how we are each spending Thanksgiving during this pandemic. Please call her to check in and chat about your plans. We care about each other and we want to make sure everyone in our congregation is going to be okay. Bramcast Hecht has our animal ministry moment for today.
Hello. Where did black cats get their bad reputation? Somewhere down the line, black cats became a Halloween favorite and a symbol of bad luck. How exactly did these cute kitties get stuck with this black cat superstition? If you think about it, it's really no surprise that mankind tends to distrust our feline friends. In the earliest days of history, cats were large carnivorous creatures that humans had to fend off to survive. How did this fear translate over to a specifically colored domesticated cat? It is believed it began in the Middle Ages in Europe. Other theories suggest that during this time, people saw black cats as signs of death and bad luck, simply because of their black fur. Black cats whose owners were accused of witchcraft were thought to be associated with the devil and evil. That being said, there were and are plenty of black cat lovers. Ancient Egyptians viewed black cats as divine. The Irish believe a black cat on your porch is good luck. In Japan, black cats are revered as symbols of prosperity. Luckily, these bad superstitions have virtually vanished, and black cats are now part of many families around the world.
It's time for the lighting of our flaming chalice. Please join me in these words. We light this chalice today in memory of those who have gone before us. May we keep their flame alive in our hearts. Blessed be. Because it is Samhain, we will also follow the tradition of our ancestors and light candles to the spirits of the four directions. Wise ones of the East, be with us today and blow your fresh winds through our minds so that we may be open to new thoughts and new ideas. Wise ones of the South, be with us today. Light your fire within us to work for justice in the world. Wise ones of the West, be with us today. May your waters teach us how to flow around all obstacles in our lives. Wise ones of the North, be with us today. Help us to become centered and grounded. Blessed be. Each week in our service, we speak an affirmation together. Please join me. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Shalom.
At this time each year, we have created Day of the Dead altars in our services, with people bringing photos of their loved ones. If you have a photo of a loved one who has died, draw it near to you now, because we'll have a time of remembering. This year, we want to remember in particular all those in this country and in the world who have died of COVID-19. They were each someone's daughter or son, mother or father, aunt or uncle, neighbor or special friend, and we hold them in our hearts. We also want to particularly remember this year those who have been killed because they were targets of hate. As we remember them, we dedicate ourselves to working for justice for all people. Because this is Samhain, we also want to take a moment to honor the 9 million people, mostly women, who were tortured and burned as witches. May we work for greater understanding in the world. Today, we want to remember those who were members and friends of our congregation who died during the last decade. May their memories touch our hearts. now of your own loved ones who have died. Picture them clearly in your mind. If you could communicate with them right now, what would you say? Take a moment to speak with them. May these loved ones remain in our thoughts and in our hearts. Thinking about those who have died makes us also think about our own lives and how we want to spend them. Listen now to my friend Katie Blado as she lies in the grass to speak this poem by Mary Oliver.
Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand. She's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. She's gazing around with her enormous, uncomplicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
It's time now to light candles for the joys and concerns that we carry in our hearts this morning. First, we have a joy. Stacy Gebeke has a job. She'll be the nanny for a new baby that will be born soon. We light this first candle for Stacy. I'd also like to light a candle of concern for my daughter, Andrea, who has been going through a very difficult time. But there's also joy, for she has just started a new job. We light a candle of concern for the terrible current spike in cases of COVID-19. So many people here and around the world are suffering. We light another candle of concern for all the people feeling anxiety about the election this week. This is a very stressful time. May we do whatever we can to care for one another. We light a candle of joy for the snow that we received this week. It may have disrupted our lives, but the moisture was very welcome. We light one final white candle for all the joys and concerns unspoken. And we light our traditional red candle for the victims of racial injustice. May the hearts of the people be open. Blessed be. Today's moment for friends and family features Stacy Gebeke.
I'm here today with Stacy Gebeke shooting pictures. which is one of her favorite things to do. I asked her how she got into photography.
It was in a class in 9th grade, and we got to do graphic arts, photography, and a couple of other things, and my favorite was the photography. And then I got into Ansel Adams and decided, ooh, that looks like fun.
So you've been doing this a long time.
I have been, and never really taken any other classes beyond that, so I'm completely self-taught.
So did you learn from the internet, or how did you teach yourself? Or just
By doing.
hit and miss?
Hit and miss by doing point and shoots to begin with, and then branched off into this one. I go back and forth between my phone camera and my Nikon D7000. Have a variety of lenses that go on this one, depending on whether I want super close up or more wide angle. Super zoom. I have a lens ball, and when you take a picture through it, it turns the image upside down. But only the portion of the image that is inside the ball will be upside down, which is really fun to do at Balloon Fiesta.
Stacy is a professional nanny. I asked how she happened to choose that career.
I originally became a nanny while I was still in Fargo and trying to get to the East Coast. I had just turned 18, and I was always good with kids. I started babysitting when I was 11, and I wanted to leave Fargo, and I didn't know what I wanted to go to school for. So originally I was going to be a nanny for a year or two until I decided what to go to college for. Never did make it to college. Been a nanny pretty much ever since. Took a couple of year break because everybody told me I couldn't make my living as a nanny. So I tried retail. Didn't really like it. Went back to being a nanny. It's the hardest work out there. At the same time, it is something that I absolutely love. And I get to start in just a couple of weeks with baby number 40 in my career. And some of my very first nanny babies now have babies of their own. Got 2 that are hot air balloon pilots. One who's a musician with a band that plays nightclubs in New York City.
So is that how you got into all the Balloon Fiesta stuff? Because their families were into balloons, or what?
I actually got into balloons sooner than that. My first Balloon Fiesta was in 1997. I came down to visit my parents, and I'd always loved balloons, and there were some balloon events out in New Jersey, but going from 75 balloons to 800 and some balloons was a game changer. And then I moved here in 2001 and started with the ballooning family in 2002, and yeah, I got even more into ballooning then.
One of Stacy's other hobbies is crocheting.
A friend of mine was always crocheting at conferences, and so she showed me some basic stuff, and I taught myself from there. My mom had actually attempted to teach me crochet when I was a kid, but I hated to sit still that long. Since becoming an adult, I've learned the positive aspect of sitting. And this one is part of a sweater that will be going out to Georgia for my sweet little lamb.
And this is the baby that you've just been finished taking care of and they moved, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it seems appropriate that he get a sweater for his first Christmas.
Soon Stacy will pick up her nanny career with a new baby. That child will be lucky to have her.
For those of you who have been waiting until the last moment, today's the day to get in your pledges for UU Westside in 2021. So far, we only have 8 pledges, and we can't support our budget on that. You were emailed a pledge card. You can print it out and mail it back, but even simpler, just email the information to our treasurer. Here's what you need to say: the total amount and how you're going to pay it, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or in a lump sum. Here's an easy email address: treasurer.uuwc@gmail.com. Do it today, and thanks for your support.
Today we're focusing on the Cauldron of Change. This is a time of great change for us. Just this week, the weather turned within hours from record highs to freezing temperatures and snow. It's a time of great upheaval in our country. It's a time of great uncertainty and great anxiety. We're not only in the middle of a pandemic with thousands of people dying, we're in a hotly contested election that could shape our country for years to come. Today, our moment for centering is a time for a meditation on change. As you listen to the music and see the images, think about what change means to you. What feelings does it evoke for you? So that was a week and a half ago, and then we had an even more drastic change. It seems that 2020 still has a lot of challenges for us. This morning, I want to tell you an ancient story as was told by author Mara Freeman. Once upon a time, there was a Welsh goddess named Ceridwen. She's usually depicted as an old woman stirring a cauldron. It's the cauldron of life and death and rebirth. Now, Ceridwen had 2 children, a girl and a boy. The girl was beautiful and bright, but the boy, we have to say it, he was ugly. He was so ugly, and he was also kind of dull-witted. Now, Ceridwen loved both her children, and being a mother, she wanted to do something to help her son. So she studied old books of magic, and she learned about a special potion that would give her son a great gift of insight. It was a potion of inspiration. Just 3 drops of this potion, and the boy would become enlightened. Now, this was not something you could just whip up in an afternoon. Ceridwen had to gather the herbs together during a special time of the month and steep them at just the right time, and then she had to brew the mixture in her cauldron. And how long do you think the potion had to cook? It had to cook for a year and a day. Now, Ceridwen needed a little help here with all that stirring. She had other goddessy things to do. So she hired a local peasant boy named Gwion, and Gwion's job was to stir the pot. Gwion was a little bit dull-witted himself, but he was happy to stir and stir the pot. There was quite a bit of potion in the pot, but only the first 3 drops would have the magical effect, and only when the time was right. So here was little Gwion stirring away with a great wooden spoon. He would keep the fire beneath it going with twigs and branches. He would even sleep next to it so the fire wouldn't go out at night. Finally, the time had almost come when the magical brew was ready. Little Gwion was stirring away as always, but on that final day, as he stirred with his big wooden spoon, 3 drops splashed out of the cauldron and burned his finger. Without even thinking, he put his finger in his mouth and sucked the burn and swallowed the 3 magic drops. Suddenly he was filled with a great light that burst upon the horizons of his young mind. It was as if everything that had ever happened and was going to happen in the world rolled out before him, and he understood infinity. And he also understood that Ceridwen was going to be really, really angry. He had accidentally swallowed the potion meant for her son. And sure enough, here she came. He dropped the wooden spoon and he ran. He could hear her angry footsteps behind him like thunder. He ran, and in his thoughts, he was like a hare leaping for safety. A hare is like a really big rabbit. And as soon as the thought crossed his mind, he actually became a hare, leaping and bounding through the fields. But Ceridwen too had the gift of shape-shifting. She saw that Gwion had become a hare and was getting away from her, so she turned herself into a greyhound. Now, hares are swift, but greyhounds are swifter. Gwion could feel her breath on his neck. He bounded to the edge of a lake, and he leaped into the water, and in his thoughts he became a fish, a salmon, and he swam away through the dark and weedy waters of the lake. But Ceridwen did not give up. She turned herself into an otter. A salmon can swim swiftly, but the otter is even swifter, and her paws were flexed to grab him. So Gwion leaped out of the water and into the air, and in his thoughts he became a bird. He was a crow. He had wings, he could fly, and away he flew. But Ceridwen was not to be evaded. She too leaped out of the water, and she turned into a hawk. Crow was swift, but Hawk was swifter. She swooped down and dug her sharp talons into Crow, but at the last second, Gwion looked down and he saw the threshing floor of a mill and a huge pile of grain. Instantly, he turned into a grain of wheat, and he dropped down from between her talons onto the threshing floor, and there he hid with thousands of other grains of wheat. So what did Ceridwen do? She turned herself into a hen. She fluttered down from the sky onto the threshing floor and began to scratch and peck and scratch and peck until she found the one grain among the many, and she swallowed it up. Now, this is not the end of the story. It seems like it would be the end of the story, but it's not. Inside Ceridwen, the little grain of wheat began to grow. It grew and it grew, and in 9 months later, Ceridwen gave birth to a baby boy. Now she knew who this was, and she still wanted to kill him. He was the one who stole the potion that was meant to help her son. So she took up a dagger. But she looked down into the child's face, and he was so beautiful, and he was her son. So she threw down the dagger, and instead she crafted a little round boat called a coracle. She wrapped the baby up in animal skins and gently placed him in the coracle and sent him alone on a journey on the ocean waves. The little boat was sent spinning and tossing by the waves for many hundreds of years. But in all that time, the child did not age by a single day. Now, many years later, there was a Welsh prince called Elphin who lived at the mouth of a river. He was a gambler and was heavily in debt, and one day he heard that the salmon were running. And he thought, if I stretch out some nets, I can catch some salmon and make some money. So he stretched his nets across the estuary, and all night long he waited there under the bright stars. And in the morning, he waded into the water to see what he had caught. He didn't have a single fish, but there, caught in the nets, was a little coracle, all encrusted with limpets and barnacles. And inside lay something all wrapped up in animal skins. Elphin folded back the skins one by one, and when the last one slipped off, there lay a little baby boy smiling up at him, and around his head shone a bright light. Elphin couldn't believe his eyes. All he could say was, "Look at that shining brow." And in Welsh, the word for shining brow is Taliesin. So that's the name that was given to the child. And Taliesin grew up to be the greatest poet and prophet that Wales had ever known. And some say he was none other than Merlin himself. That's the story of Ceridwen and Taliesin. Now, you may think, well, that's an interesting story, but what does it have to do with me? The story is about change and transformation. Gwion is forced to change, to adapt to something new. In order to survive, he becomes a fish, a very different kind of being. He finds that he can swim. He can survive surrounded by water, a totally different element. And then he's forced to change again. He becomes a bird of the air and discovers that he can fly. Without the pressure of pursuit, would he ever have thought of becoming a bird? Think about what has happened in your life to make you move in a different direction. Maybe, like in Gwion's case, it was something unpleasant that forced you to make that leap. It might have been a divorce, or the death of someone you loved, or an accident. And you found that you were able to adapt. You might miss who you were before or what you were doing before, but you changed and you survived. This is something to celebrate, the capacity within yourself to be able to adapt to change when necessary. Ceridwen was compassionate. She was a mother, and she wanted to give a special gift to her son, who was so ugly and so dull-witted. But things happen, apparently even to goddesses. The accident with the splash of liquid. During the story, you think of Ceridwen as being very harsh as she pursues little Gwion, and it's not really his fault. But what is she doing really? She's teaching him to swim. She's teaching him to fly. She's teaching him to dwell among others like the 1,000 grains of wheat. Ultimately, she gives birth to him and sets him on his journey into a new and wonderful life. Here is the image of Ceridwen that has come down to us over the centuries. She is the one who stands at her cauldron, stirring and stirring. And it is a cauldron of transformation. It's a cauldron of change. It's a cauldron of life and death and rebirth. And as she stirs, something happens for us. We change, we adapt, we transform in ways that perhaps we thought that we never would. Maybe you think, I'm tired of changing. I'm tired of adapting to new circumstances. The poet Rilke has some lines in a sonnet that speak to this. He said, "What locks itself in sameness has congealed. Is it safer to be gray or numb? What turns hard becomes rigid and is easily shattered." You don't want to be so rigid that you're easily shattered. Remember that the flexible tree blows with the wind and is not broken. And think what you would miss if you did not change. There are lines from another poet simply called E.H. that addresses this. The poem says, "A day afraid to turn to night will miss the silver moon." To stay unchanging means to miss out on beauty, to miss out on adventure. Now, this doesn't mean that it is easy. Change can be hard, especially if it comes from the loss of someone you love. Here's a poem by Stanley Kunitz about that. It's called "The Layers." I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites, over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to a feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn exulting somewhat, with my will intact to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me, "Live in the layers, not on the litter." Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done. with my changes. The secret seems to be to pay attention, to take time to examine yourself and how you're reacting, to spend some time with your inner self. Samhain is the perfect time to do this. This is a time of year when the days are shorter, there's more darkness. At Samhain, the growing season has ended. The fields have been harvested. Vegetation dies back with the frosts, as we saw this past Monday when suddenly the temperature dropped and the snow began to fall. On the outside, things are apparently dead. But to understand, you have to look closer. Deep in the soil, the seeds are working silently, preparing themselves, ready to spring forth when the light returns. It's time now for us too to do the inner work, the work that allows us to spring forth again. Pagans talk about the wheel of the year that keeps turning. This is the part of the year to pay attention to your spirit. Here are some wise words. Make peace with yourself right now. Don't judge anything that comes up for you. Just feel whatever you need to feel and practice being an observer. Observe your inner life without judgment. This dark side of the wheel of the year reminds you not to fear the darkness. There's a lot of beauty in these dark days. Embrace it. Magic is born in darkness. And as you turn inward, don't be afraid to look at your dark parts. Be an observer, no judgment. What do your shadows want to show you? What do you see if you gaze unafraid at the darkness that you fight to hide? What if instead you wrap your arms around those parts of yourself? What if you send yourself only deep, compassionate love? Being brave enough to journey into the darkness requires really mindful nurturing and self-compassion. This is hard inner work. It requires you to be so gentle and loving and kind to yourself over the next few months. This energy is really encouraging you to take deep care of yourself right now. Sleep as much as you can. Don't push yourself. Whatever self-care looks like for you, do that. Don't judge yourself for how much you need it right now. Allow yourself to rest. Be open to just receive whatever comes to you in this space. Samhain is the season of death. This is when the outer world dies to make space for new life to be born. If you're brave enough to look at the darkness, to listen to what it has to tell you, you discover parts of yourself that you need to let go of in order to grow and evolve. This is where we leave behind the things that we've outgrown. Welcome the mystery and the possibilities of the space that it creates in your life. What new dreams will be born to replace the leaves that you've let go of? Change is all around us. We're anxious about the upcoming election, devoutly hoping for change, and yet afraid of what else might be in store for us in this wild and wacky year. But be at peace. Remember that Carole is at her cauldron, stirring and stirring. She's creating something new for you. She is creating life. It's time to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice in a brief puff of smoke, but the flame of life burns strong within our hearts. Shalom. We thank the spirits of the directions. Wise ones of the north, we thank you for your steadfastness. Help us to continue to stay grounded in these uncertain times. Wise ones of the west, we thank you for your gift of fluidity. Help us to learn how to flow through all the changes. Wise ones of the south, we thank you for your fire. Help us to burn brightly for justice in the world. Wise ones of the east, we thank you for your fresh winds. Help us to remain open to new thoughts and new ways of being. Go in peace now. Let go of all anxiety. Trust that the change that comes can bring you life. Blessed be.